So we've seen how the ratings object can be used on screen. Now we somehow need to wire it up to a database to actually get its values to save somewhere. Okay, so let's go into the rating, the rating designer, because we look at there's our rating designer. At the moment we've got our rating object, and underneath that, and at the side of it we've got nothing. So what we're going to do now is add a button there, which is going to be a button which we can use to actually prompt a save. I won't actually prompt a save right now, however. What I will do is get another rating such that clicking on the one rating object and then pressing the button will cause the other rating object to kind of have the same value. So just let's go into the source for now. So there's our first rating object. So I'm going to just simply copy and paste that into the table below, the cell below. So there's col span equals 2, and I'm just going to kind of copy and paste into there the rating again. Okay. Now usually when you do that, what should happen? Oh dear, I think I've cut it rather than copied it. So let's just, sorry, I need to copy it, and then I'm going to place it in the table below. Okay. The nice thing about copying and pasting instead of the source code in the designer view is that actually it automatically gives you new names to the object. So there's rating 1 and there's rating 2, which is very handy. Okay. So now we've got those two things set up. So now if I now go back into my designer, what you will see is that you'll have one rating panel followed by a button and another rating panel underneath. Obviously, really, when designing these things, they should be much smaller than where I've created, but I'm just doing it very, very quickly. So now what I want to do is to make the button, by clicking on the button, cause the second rating control to have the same value as the first rating control. Okay, so I mean the easiest way we could probably do that. Let's go into the code behind. Okay, at the moment we've got a page load, which kind of just in the page load, all it does is display the abstract and the title of the paper that we're going to be rating. Okay, but it's got a little is post back here. Now we can use this is post back section to actually do something triggered by the user clicking on the button. Okay, and essentially because they're called rating 2, what we can just say here is rating 2 dot current rating equals rating 1 dot current rating, and that should then cause the second rating object to have the same value as the first rating object. Okay, so let's just see if that works. We have to start through mobile standards rather than through the rate thing, because the rate is dependent on getting a parameter passed to it, which is the number of the primary key of the paper that is being rated. Okay, so opening up Firefox, and this is and I'm starting this the morning after the previous tutorial, so therefore it's going to require me to log in almost certainly. If it doesn't, then there's obviously a problem with my authentication system, but there isn't. So I'm going to type in Arthur, which is another new user in the database. Log in. So this should give us now the list of papers with links to the rating page, and when that does finally appear, what it should have is then a page with two rating controls on it, and clicking on the one and then pressing select and pressing the button to submit should cause the second rating thing. Right. Okay. So I think this is just. I think this is just a problem because it's just first thing in the morning and everything's very, very slow. So now. So let's just see if we can get this to work again. Yes, we can suddenly, yes. So now I'm going to click on the rate button here and rate hyperlink. It's going to take me to the page where I can link. Now then I'm going to click on the second rating, and I click on the button now to submit, and it does. The second rating object has the same value as the first. Now I'm going to go back to 2, okay. But the problem is, you notice the second rating also is kind of clickable, which is a problem. One way we can actually change this is if we go back into the code, and in the designer for the rating page, what we can do. Sorry, in the designer for the rating page, clicking on the rating, if we go into the source and click on the second rating object, there is a property we can set which is called read only, and we can set that to true. And if that is the case, then what that means is that then you can't actually set, the user cannot set, but the system can set the value of the second rating control. So now if I again start and go through mobile standards.aspx.vb, what we should see now is the list of papers again, and by clicking on this time, we shouldn't be allowed to click on the second rating control. We should only be allowed to click on the first. Clicking on rate. Okay, so now then click on, see now my mouse goes over the second one, causes nothing to change. But if I click on the first one and press submit, then it will change. But again, nothing happens on the second one because I set it to read only equals true. Okay, so now we've got that. We've got the ability of one to set the other. Okay, but then the next thing we need to do is connect it all to a database. Okay. So let's kind of like start access. Okay. Now this is going to be a fairly simple table. Essentially, we're just putting a numerical value by a paper. Essentially, we just put a numerical value between 1 and 5. So it's a numerical value between 1 and 5 with a paper and a user. And because we're using the kind of like the built-in authentication system of ASP.NET, we're not actually using primary keys for users, we're just using a name essentially. So this is going to be a fairly simple table to create. So let's go into create table. Okay, and I'm going to call this table, let's right click and go into the design view, and I'm going to call this table user paper rating. Okay, that's a kind of simple and easily memorable way of representing that. So there's our ID. So then we're going to have a user, which is going to be simple text. The paper is obviously just going to be a reference of from the papers table. So let's create a lookup wizard. Okay, here the lookup wizard now should prompt us to which table we want to be looking up, and it's going to be papers. And then essentially, when we're looking, we're just putting the title here. I mean, remember the title is not actually what appears in the database, because it's only going to be the ID in the database, but that's what we're going to see in this particular data sheet within Access. That's the function of a lookup wizard. Okay, but it also does a lot of nice behind the scenes actions like what label would you like for your lookup column, and we'll call it, following our previous kind of thing, is going to be something like fk underscore id underscore papers. Okay, a foreign key to the ID field of the papers table. So this now will be cause us to kind of the relationships to be established, which will be very nice. And finally, we're going to have a so we've got the user, we've got the reference to the papers, and now we've got just basically the score. So let's just put in, or so we'll call it rating. I think that's probably the nice, easiest way to do it. So therefore, we've created now a table which we can use, where the user can be, every time we press the submit button, okay, then what we can do is update this table in the database with the value that's been put in. So let's kind of come out of Access for now, okay. So that's that bit done. Now then, let's go into the code here again of the rate page code behind. Okay, so here, okay, so then in the postback currently, that's what we're doing. That's where we're treating the the value that the user has put in. But here I suppose I'm replacing what I've got here, where we're just forcing the second one. Well, let's replace it, let's keep it. But let us instead now as well, let us add it to the database. Okay, so let's add whatever the user has put into that as a value, let's add it to the database. Okay, let me just hide the toolbar a second, it gives us more space to see what I'm typing. Right, so now let's, what I'm going to do is create a function. Let's just say, call it a rate paper, and it's going to take some parameters, okay, which is going to be, well, first of all, we're going to have to connect to the database anyway, so let's pass the first parameter as being the database connection, which is OLE-DB-CON, so OLE-DB-CON. So there's our database connection, because we're going to need that inside the function to actually cause the database to change. Okay, we're going to need a username. Okay, so the username, as we all know, is from user.identity.name. Okay, that gives us which user is currently looking at the paper. Okay. Essentially, we're going to need the score that the user has put in. Okay, the score can be taken from a rating1.current rating. Okay, and then of course we need the kind of like paper ID. Okay, but we will have that because we've got in this else here, which is the case of when you first go to the page without actually doing the post back, we're creating this session variable article ID as being the same as the parameter pass of the page of request params ID. So if we just copy this, that will be then. We will then have a kind of totally enclosed function called rate paper, which passes 4 parameters: the database connection, the user who's rating the paper, the actual rating they have given, and the primary key of the article in the database. Okay. So now let's, at the bottom of the page, let's now create the function which is going to handle this. Okay. So let's kind of protected sub rate paper. Okay. So it's by val. We've got the database connection. Okay, so we've got that, and then we've got the username. Okay, then we've got the score. It's going to be an integer, and then we've got the ID of the paper in the database. So it's eval paper ID as integers again. Okay, so there we've got that. So we've got everything now. We've got everything we need now to be able to now fill that table with the value that the user inputs. Okay, so this is so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just. I've already written this function, as you can probably tell. So I'm just going to paste in line by line. Okay, as we go in here. Okay, now remember, the user can only rate any paper once, or at least they can maybe change their opinion, but they cannot have 2 opinions of a paper. They can either rate it as 3, 4, 5, 2, or 1, but they can't rate it as 3 and 1 at the same time. So essentially, this table that we've just created of user paper rating will only have one instance of a user rating a paper each. So therefore, every time the user needs to rate a paper, if they've got a previous rating there, that previous rating needs to be deleted. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all, before we actually input into the database any value that the user has selected, we're going to delete any previous value this user has put in for the same paper. Okay, so what I'm going to do there is I'm going to create a string here called delete previous opinion SQL, a string. Okay, and then I'm going to create an SQL command which is going to precisely do that. That is going to delete any previous rating the user has given to this paper. Okay, so it's going to be something like wait a minute. Okay, delete star from user paper rating, where user is okay. So sorry, a little spelling mistake there. Where user is, and here we're going to kind of add with parameter. Okay, is some at user, and fkid papers is fkid papers. So that's kind of, if you like, the structure of the command. Okay. So now we're going to add with value those two values, which are user and paper ID. So, first of all, I need to create a delete previous opinion command object. I'm going to create a delete previous opinion command object, which is an OLEDB command object, which passes the SQL as the string and the database connection as being the second parameter. Okay, and then we've got these two lines where we're going to fill those two parameters. The at user is going to be replaced by username. Okay, and the at fkid papers is going to be replaced by paper ID, which, if you remember, is the fourth parameter coming into the function, and whose value is the primary key of the paper we're attempting to give an opinion about. Okay, so now, having established those two elements, then we can actually execute that. We can force the database to remove any prior opinion that we have had about that paper. Okay, so all these functions are doing. Excuse me. All these functions are doing essentially is deleting any previous opinion that we might have already established in the table about this paper, and then next we can then add the real value that we want to put in about this paper. So that deletes it. And then subsequently we're going to add the value that we want to put in. So again, I'm going to copy and paste this line rather than go through the hazardous business of typing it out myself. So now here we're going to just put it, insert into user paper rating. Okay, the fields we're going to update are the user field, the fkid papers field, and the rating field, with the values user, at user, fkid papers rating, which we're subsequently going to fill with the add with parameters, add with value method. Okay, and there's our creating the OLEDB command, add opinion CMD. Okay, and then we're going to fill those three parameters with the values, the specific values. So we're going to pass in the username for user, so there's username coming in through our function, the paper ID for the foreign key of the papers table, and score, which is the third parameter in our function, which is the actual value that the user's clicked on in the rating control, is going to go into the rating field of that table. Okay, and then finally we add we do another execute non-query. Okay, such that what we've done then is we've eliminated the previous opinion the user had, and we've added a new opinion. Okay, so what we can do now is try and test that out. Let's see if that works. Okay, let's bring up Access first of all. Okay, just to make sure that we are actually genuinely populating that field. So I'm just going to open that table, user paper rating. Okay, so I'm going to now kind of like reduce that, and now I'm going to go into mobile standards, ASPX.VB. Okay, open it up. We haven't been too long since we last looked at it, so hopefully I will not need to log in again. And it looks like I need some new memory, I think, on this computer. It's getting slower and slower. But anyway, here we go. So clicking on rate. Let's click on a different one, actually. Let's click on the human experience, just to show that I'm not just canning something. Okay, so there it is. There's the human experience paper. Okay, so now then, here we go. So I'm going to kind of click on 5 and click the button. Okay, now then, what has that done? What has that done? Let's have a look. Let's go into Access, and maybe I need to close that table down and reopen it again. Oh yes, and there it is. Look, the ID of this is the second time this field, this database. So there's me, user Arthur, a reference to the human experience paper, and I've given it the rating 5. Okay. So let's now come out of there and see if we can put in a value for another paper. Okay, so let's look at the computer for the 21st century. Okay, I'm going to go and rate that as 3. No, 2, just to make 4. Okay, click on the button. Okay, 4, and again let's go into Access, just check that has actually come through. Okay, I'm going to close that down and reopen it again. And yes, so now you see Arthur has kind of like scored 5 for the human experience, has scored 4 for the computer of the 21st century. Okay, so we have that is our database is being replenished. Now then, that's nice. But so the final now part of this thing is to make more use of this second rating control. At the moment, what we've got is a rating control for the user to put in, and another control which is fixed. So what I'm thinking is, this is what the first one, the user will put in their score, but the rating control underneath will have the average score for all the users in the database, and thereby we're getting a real sense of what most people think of that paper. And that's what we're going to do in the next practical.